My name is Michael, and this happened about 8 years ago, when I was still living in my parents' old house in a quiet suburban neighborhood in northern Illinois. At the time, I was 18, taking a gap year before starting college and living at home to save money. The neighborhood was the kind of place where everyone waved to each other, lawns were neatly trimmed, and nothing bad ever seemed to happen. That's why I didn't think twice about the man who moved into the house next door, house number 9. At first, he didn't seem unusual. He introduced himself as Mr. Halloran, maybe mid-50s, with messy gray hair and round glasses that always caught the porch light. He said he worked nights and mostly kept to himself. I didn't think much about it. My parents were away a lot for work trips back then, so I was often home alone. The first strange thing happened about a month after he moved in. One night, around 2 a.m., I was up late playing video games in my room. I remember hearing faint footsteps on the gravel between our houses. I peeked through my blinds and saw Mr. Halloran just standing in the shadows between our driveways, facing my house. I thought maybe he was checking something outside, so I didn't say anything. But he didn't move. He just stood there for maybe a full minute before slowly walking back into his own yard without looking at me. After that, little things started happening. I'd wake up to find my trash cans tipped over, even on calm nights. One morning, my back gate was wide open, and I know I'd locked it. Once, I found my garden hose stretched out across the yard, the nozzle dripping like it had been used recently. It was creepy, but still, I told myself it was probably just raccoons or kids messing around. That's until the night I woke up to tapping on my bedroom window. It was a slow, deliberate tap. I froze in bed, my heart pounding. The blinds were closed, but I could see the faint outline of someone standing outside, just beyond the glass. I reached for my phone and was about to call 911 when the tapping stopped. I stayed up until sunrise, every tiny sound making me jump. The next day, I checked the outside of my window. In the dirt below, I saw fresh shoe prints, large ones. They led away toward house number 9. I finally told my parents what had been going on. My dad brushed it off as paranoia, but my mom told me to trust my gut. She suggested I start locking every door and window, even in the daytime. A week later, my parents were out of town again. It was a Friday night, around 11:30 p.m., when the power went out. All at once, total darkness. I stepped out into the hallway and noticed something strange. The streetlights outside were still on, which meant only my house had lost power. I grabbed a flashlight and went down to the basement where the breaker box was. The door to the basement was ajar, and I always kept it shut. I shined the light down the stairs and saw movement, a shadow shifting just out of sight. I bolted the door shut, ran upstairs, and called the police. It felt like an eternity before they arrived. When they finally searched the house, they didn't find anyone, but they did find something that made my stomach drop. In the basement next to the breaker box was an old Polaroid camera, and on the floor, scattered like someone dropped them in a hurry, were photographs of me. Dozens of them, some taken through my bedroom window, some taken while I was watching TV, some from inside the house. The police questioned Mr. Halloran that night. He denied everything, of course, but 2 days later, he was gone. The house was emptied out overnight, and I never saw him again. To this day, I still don't know how many times he was inside my house without me realizing, or how long he had been watching me before I noticed the first time. But every time I pass house number 9, now owned by a sweet older couple, I can't help but glance at the blinds, just to make sure no one is standing there. When I moved into my new place, I was really just looking for a fresh start. I won't get into all the details, but let's just say I had a bad situation with an ex that made staying in my old city impossible. I didn't just want distance, I needed it. Somewhere quiet, somewhere safe, somewhere where I could try to reset my life. I'd come into some money early on in life, and honestly, I made some bad decisions with it. Not with gambling or anything like that, but with the people I surrounded myself with. I thought I was building the life I wanted, but really, I was dragging myself down. Lesson learned. By the time I left, I knew I had to cut all of it off and start fresh. The neighborhood I moved to seemed perfect for that. Low crime, quiet streets, mostly families with kids. The kind of place where people jog at 6 a.m. and kids ride their bikes around at sunset. Most of the houses were beautiful too, spaced far apart, sitting on big pieces of property with plenty of space and trees in between. That distance between neighbors was actually one of the reasons I picked the house I did. Privacy was something I craved, but there was one odd thing about my house. For some reason, the property right next to mine wasn't spaced out the same way. It was closer than most of the houses in the neighborhood were to each other. It wasn't right on top of mine, but close enough that if you stood in the right window, you could see directly into their yard. And that house, the one next door, was huge, like way bigger than mine. When I first saw it, I thought it could have easily held a family of 10. I figured grandparents, kids, maybe even cousins all under the same roof. That was honestly my first assumption. But as it turns out, I couldn't have been more wrong. Even though I like to keep to myself, I'm not the type to ignore people completely, especially when I move somewhere new. I didn't want to be that rude neighbor, the one who doesn't bother introducing themselves. So I made a point to meet almost everyone in the neighborhood within my first couple of weeks. I'll admit, by the time I worked my way around to my next-door neighbor, I was drained. Making small talk with strangers for hours is exhausting, and I'd already had my fill of polite conversations with middle-aged couples and parents of young children. They were all nice enough, really sweet people, but I always felt slightly out of place around them. Most of them seemed so stable, so successful, like they had their lives neatly tied together in ways I hadn't figured out yet. And me? I was a single guy in my late 20s, renting a house way bigger than I needed, trying not to look like I didn't belong. Still, I knew if I didn't meet the people living next door, I'd keep putting it off until it was awkward. So, even though my social battery was dead, I sucked it up and walked up their long driveway. I'd gotten used to being greeted by someone middle-aged, so when a young-looking guy opened the door, I was surprised. He had this shaggy mullet, and I swear he looked even younger than me. For a second, I didn't even know what to say, but I launched into my little new-to-the-neighborhood speech anyway. Before I could even finish, he flashed me this massive smile and cut me off. He said something like, "Oh, wow, someone who was actually born in my decade. What a surprise." I laughed, relieved. I told him I felt out of place being the only single guy among so many families, and he laughed too, telling me not to worry, that most of the people here kept to themselves anyway. Honestly, that was nice to hear. He introduced himself as Damon. He even told me I should come by for a drink sometime. I half-jokingly said, "Hell, why not right now?" expecting him to laugh and invite me in. Instead, he froze for a second, glanced over his shoulder like he was checking something in his living room, and then told me he was busy working. That caught me off guard. I asked him what he did for work, since that felt like the natural next question. His big smile faded just a little. He stared at me a beat too long, then laughed in this almost forced way and said, "Finance." And that was it. No details, no explanation. Just finance. It struck me as odd, but I didn't push. I asked if he had roommates, because honestly, that house was way too big for one guy. But to my surprise, he told me he lived there alone. That floored me. Sure, I lived alone too, but my house wasn't even half the size of his. Who rents a place that big just for themselves? It didn't make sense. Still, Damon seemed cool. We chatted for a little while longer, then he gave me his number and went back inside. I remember walking home excited that there was someone my age right next door, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something about him didn't add up. For the next few weeks, I texted Damon a couple of times, trying to set something up. He always had excuses. Too busy, swamped with work, always apologetic, but never available. Eventually, I gave up. I'm not the type to chase after someone who doesn't seem interested. After that, things just got weird. I never saw anyone go in or out of Damon's house. No visitors, no takeout deliveries, no packages picked up. His car was always in the driveway, but he never seemed to leave. The guy lived like a ghost. I work from home and my office is on the third floor. My desk happens to face a window that looks out toward his property. I know it sounds creepy, but I couldn't help noticing his house from time to time. And the more I noticed, the stranger it seemed. Months went by. Then one night, a Wednesday, I remember that clearly, I woke up around 2 a.m. to loud music. At first I thought I was dreaming, but no, it was real. Music, shouting, laughter. I went to the window and saw 7 or 8 cars lined up in Damon's driveway. He was having a party. Now, I don't care if people have fun, but this was the middle of the week and the volume was insane. I threw on a hoodie and walked over. The music was blasting. The house looked alive with people inside. I knocked on the door. Nothing. Knocked again, harder. Still nothing. Finally, I tried the handle. To my surprise, the door swung open. Inside, I saw a pile of shoes in the foyer, at least 10 pairs. But the house was empty. Completely empty. No people, no drinks, nothing. Just the music. And then it hit me. The music wasn't music at all. It was a recording of people laughing, clinking glasses, yelling, a fake party. But why? The cars were real. The shoes were real. There had to be people there. I crept deeper inside until I noticed a door slightly ajar. It led to the basement. Something told me that's where I'd find answers. I went down. The air smelled faintly of bleach. The closer I got, the stronger it became. My stomach turned. At the bottom of the stairs, I saw light coming from another door. Through the crack, I spotted 3 older men in heavy-duty work clothes, wearing goggles and rubber gloves. They were staring at something out of my view. And that mechanical noise, a grinding, buzzing sound like machinery, filled the air. I didn't wait to find out what it was. That smell, that sound, those men, everything in me screamed to leave. I turned back. As I reached the stairs, the light behind me suddenly dimmed. Someone had shut the door. I didn't hear it over the fake party noise, but I felt it. I ran. I bolted up the stairs, out the front door, across my yard, and through my back door. I locked it behind me, heart pounding. Minutes later, I peeked out from my darkened office. The front door of Damon's house burst open, and a group of men, all older, none of them Damon, spilled outside. They scanned the street, the yards, searching. Eventually, they went back inside. The music stopped. The house went dark. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. By morning, every car was gone. Damon's car, too. And it never came back. Days turned into weeks, and his house sat empty. The grass grew long, packages piled up on the porch. No sign of Damon, no sign of anyone. I asked my neighbors if they'd heard the party that night. They all looked at me like I was crazy. No one had heard a thing. It's been months now. His house is abandoned, at least on the surface, but every night I catch myself staring out my window at it. And every night I can't shake the feeling that someone in there is staring right back.